Hi, welcome to Snack-Sized Civics. I'm the host for this week's session, and I have Sharon Sinclair with me. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Erica. It's good to be here.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here, and we're going to talk about the history of voting.
That's right.
So I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay. Well, as you know, the history, the right to vote has been a major focus of the League of Women Voters forever. And so it's kind of interesting to me to look back at how the voting privilege, and I would call that a privilege, has developed over time. Because we always think, well, it started in 1776, when we decided that people who are governed have the right to pick their government, and the only way to do that is through the vote. And at 1776, in those few years, anybody could vote. It wasn't until the Constitutional Convention in 1789 when they started to set down some guidelines, and the first people who could vote in the United States were white men, Christians, who owned property. And they were the only ones who got the vote. And then in the ensuing years, that changed a bit, and they decided, no, not all people own property, and they could, anybody who was an upstanding white male Christian citizen could vote. And over time, at that convention, they determined that the states would have the primary decision on who and how people could vote. It had to be a citizen, of course, and a white male landowning citizen. Until then, they started to think, well, maybe non-Christians could vote. And state by state was deciding this because that decision had been left to the states, that the individual states could make determinations. And for instance, in the West, and Wyoming was the first state that they gave women the right to vote. So that set a precedent that did not set well with the rest of the country, because it was decided that since women would obviously vote the same way their husband did, and so that would give married men 2 votes instead of just 1. So that was one of the main arguments against the suffrage movement that started. And then, of course, with the Civil War, that opened up, and the 15th Amendment, which gave black men, African American men, the right to vote. And that was the 15th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was the one that said that citizens, anybody born in the United States or naturalized in the United States, would have citizenship. And of course, that was always the primary step to being able to vote. So, and of course, the states are setting out the rules so that even when African American men, not women, but men, were given the right to vote, the states still could set the rules. And they set some very difficult rules, like you had to be literate. So they'd give literacy tests. You had to buy a ticket to vote, a poll tax. And therefore, a lot of people, especially right after the Civil War, people who were poor of any race were not able to vote in those states. So that became a real setback to the freedom to vote for a lot of people. And then, of course, in the 1869, Wyoming did let women vote, and women got pretty excited about the idea that should be able to vote, certainly. And sometimes they were allowed to vote in, city, school board elections in some communities. Mm-hmm. But here again, the state controlled who voted. So then in 1920, when the 19th Amendment, the one that gave women the right to vote, passed, that was when League started to look at how many people were really informed about the process, about the right to vote. And that's how League started their first activities. And of course, that was not limited just to women, but they tried to educate everyone that, in order to make this system work, people had to get informed and vote. And that's why to this day, League does candidate forums and candidate debates so that people can learn that when you go into vote, no matter your citizenship, of course, is critical, but your stand on issues is strictly your own, and that's why you have the right to a private ballot. The voter will never be connected directly to that ballot once it's cast. So you have complete determination over that. I remember the first time I've operated as an election judge for quite a few years over time, and one of the first years I did it was out in Strawberry Lake Township, which no longer, now they all send their ballots in. They don't have a polling place there anymore, but it was a very little old schoolhouse, I think. And this couple came, Carolyn Ingebrigtsen, who was an original League member as well, was another election judge. And we had two little booths with just curtains around them, because you had the right to privacy for your ballot. And this couple came in, and Carolyn knew them, and they picked up their ballots, and they were a couple, and they were going to go into this little pooling place together. And Carolyn opened the other little curtained area, and she said to the gal who was going in to vote with her husband, and she said, "No, you come in here and vote, Alice." And Alice said, "Oh, no, he always has to help me." And Carolyn said, "That's not how this works." So she then stepped into the other booth. But I think it kind of emphasized that at one time, that a lot of people did not accept that women would have this the initiative to cast their own ballot and have their own thinking about the subject. But they did, and of course that's been our right for a long time. But it was not only women who were denied access to the vote for a long time because of the citizenship thing being primary. At one time, that Asian people, Chinese Exclusion Act was in place, and that prevented people of Chinese background from voting. And also, this is crazy, but Native Americans were not allowed to vote because at first they were not considered citizenships, and I think it was in 1924 that it was determined that Native Americans, yes, they were citizens. So then that opened the right to vote for the Native Americans. The big change to the voting rights, of course, was 1965 with the civil rights change, which said that not only people of all races and sexes could vote, but that they started to control things like the polling tax could not happen, and guidelines to voting had to be more even keel, and that has really changed things. In 2013, I believe it was, the Supreme Court kind of opened that up again, and because 1965 they ended this business that the states could just do anything they wanted to. There were many changes that took place at that point. Now the Supreme Court has kind of cut back on, given some of those rights back to the states. So the states can do more about, no polling taxes, but they can have fewer polling places, and they can control the write-in ballots and so on. So that has changed a bit. But, we've come a long way, a lot of changes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. This is always an interesting show and great people to talk about different topics. So,
well, it's it's an important topic.
It is.
And we want to see everyone get out and exercise that very precious right.
Right to vote.
Right.
Right. Thank you for joining us on Snack-Sized Civics. If you'd like to sponsor a show, we've got the email that you can contact a league member. And stay tuned for more Snack-Sized Civics coming in the future.